Hello and welcome to the Virtuous Life. I'm your host, Pat Oedy-Murray, and we've been doing a kind of, different shows on things that we need to apply virtue to, problems in our lives that we really need to cultivate virtue to overcome. And so I came across this book, and there's so many things I love about this book, but it's really kind of I want to say a pocket kind of book, although you got to have big pockets, but that you can use if you're struggling with an addiction, especially to pornography. That's what the book is basically about, but it's written so well that it can be applied to almost any addiction in life. So I want to welcome the author of this book, and it's Dann Aungst, and he is a certified addiction counselor, speaker, author, recovering addict, and founder of Road to Purity. Dann has authored several books, including From One Addict to Another, 40 Days to Freedom, and Winning the Battle for Sexual Purity. He also created the God's Plan for Healthy Sexuality workshop and the internationally distributed pamphlet 5 Keys to Freedom from Sexual Sin, which received an imprimatur from Archbishop Sam Aquila. Welcome, Dann. So nice of you to be on the show.
Thank you, Pat. Pleasure to be here.
And this is the name of the book, just for the audience to know, is called Winning the Battle for Sexual Purity, Forged in the Fire of Divine Love. Dann, why did you write this book?
This book, it's a number of several books that I have written on this topic. It follows in line with the Road to Purity mission and what we're doing. All of it is based out of my own history of addiction in this area and pretty much God's call and guidance to recovery, and quite literally asked to share my story and what He's done for me and how to guide other men through this issue. This book itself came out after some others as an answer to something that is smaller, less expensive, easy to distribute, easy to carry around, and a lot of people buy hundreds of them and give them away even. So it kind of follows that.
I would suggest that too. I mean, if anybody's listening to the show that you might be a part of a support group for these kinds of things, or you're doing something at your church on this, these are great books to have so that you could give them out to people. They're really very good. Dann, I want to kind of, before we delve right back into this book, I do want to ask a little bit about you are, if I see this correctly, aren't you the CEO of Road to Purity? Am I saying that right?
President and founder.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I put on my business card, but CEO, same thing.
You're all of those things. So tell us a little bit about this.
I started and I run it, okay?
That's right. There you go. Founder, I'm just taking care of it. So tell us about this Road to Purity. Give us some information on that before we go back to the book.
Sure. Road to Purity is an organization that it's been around about 10 years that I founded. It started out of the call of my history of addiction in this area, pornography and sex addiction, and we deal with not only individuals, but we help work with Catholic parishes and priests. We teach priests how to address this in the confessional. We work with them on how to do this talk about this from the pulpit. We have a new program coming out on that. We are working with individuals and families, and we have a program we're actually developing now that is specifically for the family. We worked with seminarians for several years, provide materials to parishes, individuals, online programs, online community for guys, that need accountability. They can't find one or aren't comfortable with people they know.
Right.
Just so many things that we offer.
Yeah. And I don't know, and you can probably speak to this, but is this one of those situations where, not that, alcohol or drug addiction isn't a real problem, but it seems like there's probably a little more. I mean, people, once they recognize they have an alcohol or drug problem, they'll go get help. It just seems like pornography is one of those kind of silent things nobody wants to talk about, nobody wants to admit to. Is it harder, do you think, for that type of an addiction to seek help? Or is it just my mind?
No, you're right. There is. I mean, alcohol and things like that, they've been around or recognized long enough that the shame and the stigma has kind of minimized. And it's not such a bad thing to say, hey, I was a former alcoholic, or I'm struggling with this. But to say, hey, I look at porn, kind of, people look at you like, oh, you're kind of creepy. Are you one of those pedophiles? Or, it's a whole,
Exactly.
it's a different shame
Yeah.
with it. It is different to overcome as well.
Yeah. So do you
It's
think,
something that's in the, yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, do you think that, do we have any idea, I guess, in our society today, what the numbers look like? Since you work on this in Road to Purity, what are the numbers statistically of people that are involved in viewing pornography? What what is one of the things that makes it a little more rampant today? Is there ages? I'm kind of looking at some kind of a maybe statistical thing here.
Sure. There's so many different statistics that have been done on this topic, and
Hmm.
some of them vary here and there. Many of them are fairly old, but as a general thing, you could say there's a study done 7 or 8 years ago that probably 50% to 60% of Christian men would say anonymously that they're addicted to pornography. That's along with about 20% of women. Now,
Hmm.
that's years ago. Today, the number is actually probably higher than that. You talk to any
Wow.
priest and what they hear in confession, and the vast majority of confessions involve some type of sexual-related type sins.
Hmm.
Um, the real difference with this number, the big part of it is that God created us to be sexual beings.
Yeah.
We are created to we are wired to co-create life with God. We are wired to be intimate with our spouses. And then that whole thing is perverted and twisted into something that's used for ourselves as a selfish nature rather than a giving nature. And the extreme pleasure that's associated with it, as far with the dopamine and
Sure.
oxytocin, vasopressin, the whole cocktail of naturally occurring chemicals and drugs that go in the brain that go with that make it more difficult to overcome and perpetuate it. But the kind of difference is you can't, an alcoholic can't imagine a shot of whiskey and get drunk.
Right.
Person can imagine sexual relations and get aroused and get pleasure
That's
from
true.
just thinking about it. And
Right.
that's a whole different ballgame.
That's very true. I was going to ask you how it was different from other addictions. So, yeah, I guess I just never occurred to me that way. But yeah, that's very true. Your body has these natural responses to things. So let's kind of delve in a little bit. I want to get kind of started a little bit talking about some specifics about the book, because I think
Sure.
for some people, especially if you don't have an addictive personality or you don't have an addiction in your life, you just can't necessarily understand, why don't people stop? Well, can't they just stop? So I think it's good to understand these kinds of things. So you talk about desire and motivation and to change, right? Because I think for a lot of
Hmm.
people, like I said, they just think, well, just stop it. and people can't always do that. And the other thing is, people around you a lot of times notice it wrecking your life before you notice it wrecking your life. So why is it important to be able to evaluate what you desire and your motivations surrounding this addiction?
There's so many people that I talk to that don't want to stop. They don't have the desire or the motivation to change. Some of it is that they've convinced themselves that there's nothing wrong with it. It's just between them and their own actions, which is not true either. But they don't really want to. So I talk to a lot of especially women whose partners are addicted, and they'll tell me that, well, he said he doesn't want to stop. It shouldn't be a problem. I should just not worry about it because it's not about me, and so forth. But they don't understand what it's doing to their partners, to their spouses, emotionally and physically, mentally, everything else, psychologically. Right. So when they don't have the desire and they're not interested in doing anything about it, there's not much you can do other than pray for them. But right. When there is a desire and you say, I don't like the way my life is going. I don't like the way I feel when I'm involved in this. I don't like the way it chains me. It controls me. I want to stop. Then we can work with the person. Then you can start working on a plan and trying to get through steps to get free from it.
Now, in the book, you list a whole list of statements for people to kind of reflect on, so that they can see, is this part of the problems that they're seeing in their lives, and it kind of gets them to think about, okay, yeah, a life is not what it should be. Maybe I need to change. In all of those statements that you listed in the book, and a number of them, is there one more than another that seems to be a more common experience to people that have this addiction?
Not necessarily. I mean, some are reaching a little bit maybe, but more of them are. It's more probably the relationship to themselves. Is that I feel like I'm out of control. Okay. I can't control my sexual desires. I feel like I'm lost. In this is the biggest part of it. And these are basically, honestly, the first signs of something that needs to change and whatnot. But then it's digging into the actual issue is deeper than the behavior. What I always say to people is porn is not about porn. It's about something deeper. Yeah. So it's finding that you're out of control yourself. And then once you've got that and you have the desires, I need to do something. Now we actually can look to the real problem.
So the way you've kind of laid out this book is you've got lessons, which are kind of the educational piece of it all, and then daily action plans. And so why was it important for you to educate, to have these lessons for people that have this issue?
The behavior or addiction, compulsion, however you want to classify it or level you're at, you need to really have part of the understanding of what's going on and why you're doing this. Just doing a daily action plan that we have doesn't completely rid you of it. If it was just a behavior alone, then often you can just take action and get yourself into a different ritual or different behavior and learn a different behavior, because they say 30 to 45 days you can change a habit by just choosing a different habit. Well, it's much deeper than that with this.
It is.
What we find so often is I can't even count the number of people who've reached out to me that email, phone, whatever. It's I started your programs or read your books to get control of my porn habit. But what you're doing is you're changing who I am, and the porn's going away on its own. And that has to be education and learning about yourself and the deep inside. Yeah, that's what we want to do, is change who you are, and that works with anything.
Yeah, Yeah. I do beg, when we talk about that 35 to 40 days to form a habit, I said it's never worked in my life with exercise. you know, I can exercise for 35 or 40 days and give it up on that 41st day without any problem. So
Yeah.
I want that to
Well,
be a habit. I just
You know
Go
what?
ahead.
Your motivation
What?
and desire isn't involved with that.
You got it. That's
why.
it. That's it. It's exactly it. You have hit the nail on the head. So I want to talk a little bit because I had never heard it kind of put the way that you put it in the book. You talk about setting boundaries, and you say this is probably might be the most difficult part of the process of change. Why is that so difficult? And if you want to talk a little bit about the difference between primary and secondary, that's great too.
Yeah. Changing a behavior is always difficult, like exercising, whatever. It's always difficult to change a behavior that has been ingrained in you for years or decades. And because of the fact that it's not just about the behavior only, it's about something that leads up to the behavior, that triggers it, that is deeper inside. We have to begin to recognize those factors. Now, what we define as primary boundaries is the thing that, pretty much all the other groups that I've been involved with or seen and learned from is the actual act of acting out, looking at pornography, masturbating, whatever.
Right.
That act itself is a primary boundary. And pretty much all of the, groups that I'd been in and different things, they say, have you violated your boundary? And say, oh, yeah, and it's just, they all define it the same way. Well,
Okay.
once you're at the act of looking at porn, you've already passed the line,
Right.
as it were.
Right.
And I always say you can't, the train has left the station, so to speak, and you can't make
Exactly.
a U-turn with a train.
Right.
It's very difficult to stop once you've gone that far. So whenever you ask guys and they say, well, what happened? They say, well, it just happened. I don't know. That's not true. Something started. Right. What started it? And that's where the secondary boundaries come in. And we several levels of them. And it's just keeping person away from that far reaching, that final acting out or final looking, if you will. So some of the things are like, you don't take your phone in the bathroom. There's a temptation there. It's easy while you're in there and you got nothing to do. You can just sit on your phone and look and you surf onto things and it's private and nobody knows. And, it's just a dangerous place to be if that's something that you discover for yourself. If you look at email after everybody's gone to bed, and you look at email and then, I'm going to check Facebook and see what my ex-girlfriend is doing. And then I'm going to look at, what the actresses are wearing at the Grammys. Then I'm going to see what new, sexy swimsuits have come out or whatever. And you start just looking at things that seem like, well, this is not that bad. It's just a little, that begins the attraction. It begins what is sometimes referred to as a dopamine drip. You begin to get a little bit of interest, and pretty much you want more and a little bit more, and then you go further and further, and you find out you went to your office, home office at night after everybody's gone to bed. You start looking at email, and 45 minutes later, you're looking at porn.
Yeah.
And it just goes downhill. So certain boundaries have to be set as to what is happens. It's like for me. My wife likes watching Dancing with the Stars show. And the outfits they wear, the provocative movements and the dances, that is a problem for me. And she knows it. So she records the shows and watches them later. I don't want to watch it. My secondary boundaries, I don't watch that show.
Right.
I just don't watch it. So it's kind of you can kind of define something as a near occasion of sin.
I love that phrase.
Oh, it's not so bad, but it gets started. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And that's what I when you brought that up in the book too, to think, because I'm trying to think of secondary boundaries. Okay, and the minute you said, think of them as a near occasion of sin, I'm thinking, oh yeah. I mean, these are the kind of the slight temptations that get you leading down that kind of slippery slope to get you to
Right.
that, where you're, like you said, the train's left the station, I can't turn around now. And so
Right.
I think, and so how do people, I mean, is the best way to identify those secondary boundaries? Because you also mentioned that list may grow over time. So this has to be someone who is really watching their behavior or is kind of evaluating and reflecting on what leads them into this. Is this kind of what it's all about?
It sure is. What we really, the overall arching concept is self-awareness.
Yeah.
And that's kind of something that all of us should be growing in anyway, regardless of our behaviors and what we do, looking to what we do and why we do things. And later in the book, there's a chapter that called River Under the River.
Mm-hmm.
And the river is what we do. The river under the river is why we do it.
Yeah.
And there's several examples there, and there's several chapters built around that. And it's all learning why we do what we do.
Yeah.
And it's any kind of behavior, really, sinful or not. It's just behaviors that maybe already aren't healthy or ones you don't want to do. There's a reason why we're doing them, and it's looking there. And it's self-awareness to figure that out.
Exactly. So can you, we've got a little time yet here in the first half of the show. So can you kind of talk to the audience a little bit about this addiction cycle if people aren't familiar with it? What does it look like?
Sure. For the most part, the cycle is, and it's being the temptation of it, of anything, and then there's a, because of the behavior or has a root to it that I talk about. There's actually a wound or a brokenness that we all have. I call it the wounded self. There's shame, involved with that, which is another chapter focused on that. When an event happens in our life, something that's unpleasant, the boss tells us we didn't do a good job at something, or our wife yells at us because we didn't load the dishwasher right or whatever, we feel a level of incompetency, like we didn't do something right. So we feel less than. Now, we are not wired by God to feel that way. We're wired for perfect love. And so we feel less than. Then we need to cope with that. And we develop rituals and ways to cope with these negative feelings that we have. And they can be, whether it's drinking, it's zoning out and watching TV, or, watching, shorts on YouTube or whatever it is. But too often it's something that brings you pleasure as well. And sexuality is one of the most pleasurable things that God created us to be involved in. So pornography is something that we begin to look at or engage in as an escape mechanism. I also call it a medication.
Right.
And when that happens, we move into the acting out phase of things. And then once we've completed, that piece, now we sit here and have guilt. This is a sin. I shouldn't have done this. This is bad. And depending on a person, they can go into despair. And then what do? Well, I've got to clean this up. I've got to confess my sin. I've got to either talk to an accountability partner, hopefully if you got one.
Right.
I've got to go to confession and, so forth. And that will, can kind of reset things and clean things up. The other danger is sometimes people will begin the process and say, well, you know what? I'm just going to look at porn anyway because I can just go to confession tomorrow.
Right.
The confession becomes part of their ritual. Now you have the sin of presumption added into everything else that people don't typically realize, and it compounds the whole process.
Yeah. One of the things, too, and I forgot to bring it up before we get into the addiction process, but one of the things you mentioned in the book, which I think is, I thought it was a great insight, is because you're talking about halt, right? Hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. And then you also add bored and stress to it. But then you say, if you become aware of that this is what's going on, and you don't take action, you're really violating a secondary boundary, and by action, it means to fulfill those needs in a positive way. Correct?
Correct.
So those kinds of things are things that also can lead into pornography and other kinds of sexual addictions. So if you're not familiar with it, because I think so often,
or any behavior really.
Yeah. Yeah, because I just think so often we just act in those moments. That's why when you say self-reflection, I mean, for me, food has always been my, go-to, if I'm stressed or if I'm bored or if
Yep.
Just grab something out of the cupboard and eat,
Right.
And
that's another big addiction that goes with this.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the
And
same
you're not
thing,
even
bored and
aware.
stress. How many people eat because they're bored?
Yep.
We're stress eaters.
Yep,
Same
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it is that awareness, because you really do stop thinking. You don't even think about it. It isn't even like a conscious choice a lot of times.
Yep.
You just, this show's on, I'm going to go to the cupboard, get it, and sit down. You don't even think, like, am I hungry?
Right.
No. Yeah, exactly. So I love that you bring that into this whole thing. I want to kind of get into, because I think this is an important piece. I'm trying to check time here to make sure we got enough time. I think we do. We got a couple minutes here. Can you explain rituals? When you talk, you kind of threw that in, but how does that fit into this whole process? What is a ritual, and how does that fit into the process?
A ritual is basically a series of actions or things that you would do in response to something. I have a ritual. You can eat things from. I have a ritual in the morning. I get up, I put my clothes on, and then I go brush my teeth. Or I get up and I take a shower first, and then I put my clothes on, then I brush my teeth. Or
got it.
I eat and then I brush my teeth. Yeah, there's a certain process and order that you do things, and that's a ritual. But that will happen with a negative behavior as well. So when you have something that is like a medication, like pornography, that you are trying to medicate a negative feeling or a bad event or something, then that's where I say a ritual will be. I go to look at email. Then I look for Facebook for old friends or girlfriends, and then I do the. It's like, oh, here's 5 things that I tend to do every time, and they end up looking at porn.
Got it. And so those are always
kind of the ritual.
Those are usually always part of your secondary boundaries, then, right?
Yeah, most often, yeah. The rituals of the things that are leading up to the acting out are often secondary boundaries.
Great. Okay, well, we are already at break, and so I want everybody to know our guest today is Dann Aungst. He is a certified addiction counselor, speaker, author, recovering addict, and founder of Road to Purity. He's authored many books, and the one we're talking about today is Winning the Battle for Sexual Purity, forged in the fire of divine love. So come back on the other side of the break as we continue this fascinating look and very helpful ideas and insights into this addiction. You're listening to The Virtuous Life. I'm your host, Pat Oedy-Murray.
People are surprised to learn that natural family planning couples have a lower divorce rate than couples who use other methods of family planning. NFP couples report better communication that improves marital intimacy and respect. For information on how you and your spouse can learn natural family planning in English or Spanish, see the Couple to Couple League's website at ccli.org or call 800-745-8252.
The Catholic Church teaches that Jesus Christ is literally and wholly present, body and blood, soul and divinity, under the appearances of bread and wine. St. John the Apostle records the John chapter 6 Bread of Life discourse, in which Jesus states that his flesh is true food and his blood true drink. Who better to understand John's writings and subsequent teachings than a disciple and student of John, St. Ignatius of Antioch? In his letter to the Smyrnians in 110 AD, Ignatius writes, "I have no taste for corruptible food, nor for the pleasures of this life. I desire the bread of God, which is the flesh of Jesus Christ. And for drink, I desire his blood, which is love incorruptible." The Catholic Church absolutely follows St. John and St. Ignatius in taking Jesus at his word. Examining the truths of the Catholic faith, this is faithforensics.org.
Hi, this is Pat Oedy-Murray from the Virtuous Life. Thanks for being with us today. Today, we have with us Dann Aungst. We've had a fascinating conversation in the first half of the show. The name of his current book is Winning the Battle for Sexual Purity. Dan's authored several books on addiction, and he's the president and founder and chief operating officer of the Road to Purity, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit more at the end of the show. But he's a certified addiction counselor, speaker, so he brings experience and a vast amount of knowledge to this idea of addiction to pornography. Dan, thanks so much for taking time to be with us today.
Sure, thank you for having me.
Well, we've been talking about little kind of pieces of this book, different chapters in it, and how important it is that that people become self-aware and motivated in order to really make a difference in their lives and to change this behavior. And it is really, I think, which I love you said earlier, it's about changing kind of who you are as you continue to become more virtuous, and certainly your faith plays a role in this. You start to lose almost the behavior. It's not just focusing on changing the behavior itself, but changing so many things about yourself, correct?
Correct.
Okay. One of the things that I was quite taken by as I was reading this is you talk about accountability again being a major part of this program. How do you incorporate accountability into this winning the battle?
Accountability on any major behavioral change, especially in addiction, and especially something like pornography, sex addiction, it's not something you're going to do alone. If this is something you attack by yourself, it's really between you and Satan, and you will always lose. Mm-hmm. He can always convince you to just do one more time, or it's not that big a deal, and take you down that road very easily, and we can talk ourselves into that by listening to those lies. So accountability gives us the responsibility and awareness to be aware of what we're doing and what we're thinking and so forth. And a good accountability partner will ask you, the questions of what led up to things and what's going on in your life and so forth. So it's the idea of being able to talk to another individual openly and honestly about your behavior, about what's leading up to it, about the falls that you have, and the experiences. And that can happen, ideally with, some friends that are close and know what's going on to help, but often that's too shameful. So we offer a platform called the Simon Community where guys go on and they can share with other men the struggles, or when they're in a battle, they need prayers. And we have meetings, Zoom meetings, several times a week where guys will go through and go through check-in rounds and go through part of our program and whatnot. And guys find accountability partners there, as well. So it's all part of the healing process. It's really important to do.
So is this, Dan, is this kind of this accountability person, is this someone like if you felt like I really want to kind of go down this road again, this is somebody that you could call, almost like an AA, they talk about sponsors, but this is somebody you can call and they can kind of help you put the brakes on?
Yeah, sponsor and accountability partner are kind of synonymous in a way. The reality of it, and what I see, is that in this addiction, because of the shame to start with, but then because of the strong chemical desire of wanting it, which happens in others as well, but really with this, so often guys will get started in the process. They'll be violating their secondary boundaries that I talk about, or they're not aware of them because they're not in our programs, and they will get to the point to where, I don't want to call my accountability partner because I don't want to stop. right now. I don't want to be interrupted. I just want to do this. I want to be left to myself to do this. But it's important to try to begin to do that, recognize as early as possible in the process, so you're not so down that, train on the track that you can't turn around. But what's also important is to call them after the fact. If you've fallen and you didn't call after. Because, pretty much everybody, once they've, acted out, they will say, I feel so bad, I don't want to do this again. Now there's the shame involved. Now, you don't want to call because you're so ashamed that I just fell again. But at the same time, you're in the personal resolve that I'm done, I can't do this. But very quickly, the lies come in and say, you know what, I've already sinned, I'm already done, I'm going to confession Saturday, I might as well just do it again. What's the difference? What's one more time? That then you begin to binge into a process. And what's important is then if you call and talk to somebody saying, I just acted out and this is really bad. And then they talk about what's going on. Dig underneath with the process as what we teach. And the right accountability partner will do that. And we can teach them to do that. Then you begin to find out what's going on underneath and can work on the issue. So then the desire to act again lessens substantially. So you're less likely by far to binge before you go to confession or whatever.
Okay, that makes sense. So one of the things I think, again, you do so many wonderful things in this book, but you, in one of the chapters, you actually talk about God's plan for sexuality. Do you find that the people that you're dealing with in these situations really do not understand that there is kind of a God has a plan for sexuality created by God? And you also talk about authentic sexuality is also about purity. Do people that have this addiction, is this kind of new information for them, or have they just ignored it on purpose? Do you have a feel for that?
It's a lot of both.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot of both. The ignoring on purpose is probably the higher percentage. However, even with those, they typically don't know the full depth of God's plan. It's really diving into some basic theology of the body, even though we don't use that language in it. But that's really what it amounts to, is that part of understanding a theology of the body. It's who we are in God, what we're designed to be, and that the sexual act is a good thing with our spouses. It's meant for bonding, and there's a psychologist somewhere, I forget her name. Sex is meant for bonding and babies.
Yeah.
Well, that's really what it is. It's co-creating life with God, but it's also bonding, with your spouse. And then there's chemicals that do that in the brain that are biologically, that's part of what happens, and it's
exactly
God's plan. It's supposed to be that way. So. And the other part of it is they'll try to just excuse that. Well, I'm a guy and I just have urges. I just want to do, Well, there's different things that are involved with that too.
Yeah.
So.
I know. I always when I teach this to college kids, and talk about. That God gave us a will and an intellect so that we can understand, and otherwise we're no better than the animals. And I usually use sex as an example because college kids pay attention then. And I get, and I one time I got a kid in the back of the room said, I think I must be an animal. I was like, oh my gosh, but it is that. It's like, there is kind of this, we excuse boys and young men from these kinds of things. And I like that you kind of put out there, that's kind of a cop-out. That's not really the way we're designed and the way we're created to be. We're designed differently,
right.
But, you do a nice job
we
with
have
that.
urges, yes.
Yeah.
But we have a will. They need to be controlled. They need to be, handled. But the urges really are, the urge isn't that I want to bond with my spouse. The urge is I need a dopamine fix.
Yeah.
I need the pleasure. Yeah. Now, there's other ways to get that, that you can do. So it's understanding, and that's part of the education part of our book, is understanding this process and what the options are, or exit strategies. We have a whole chapter on that.
Yeah. And talk a little bit about. Yeah, talk a little bit about what an exit strategy is. Just give kind of a general understanding of that.
Yeah, it's when you're in the beginning to get tempted, when you maybe have either violated a secondary boundary, or you really want to. It's a way to it's a redirect in a way. It's what else am I going to do? How am I going to do something in place of this? It's recognizing that there's a desire for this action, and generally it's a craving for the dopamine in the brain, the pleasure that comes from that chemical, and it's looking what else can I do to redirect myself, but also maybe even get some dopamine in another way. And things like exercise does that. Engaging in something of other things that are pleasurable, like a hobby, just talking to somebody. And that's where the accountability partner comes in, to where when you're talking to yourself, and this is where people get addicted to AA a lot of times, or SA, Sexaholics Anonymous, and because when you have the opportunity to talk about yourself in an intimate way, it boosts dopamine. So there's a real benefit to that. So when you call your accountability partner and say, hey, I'm having a bad day, this is going on, I'm feeling like I want to go, look at porn or something, but I just need to do something. And you talk about it, and you talk about yourself and your own intimate ways, and what's bothering me, and my boss did this, that I'm feeling incompetent, and so forth, and you dive into those things. You're sharing about yourself. You're boosting dopamine, number one, but you're bringing what's really underneath to light, and that's where the enemy loses his power, is when the temptation and when his lies come to the surface and to the light. So you're really hitting a lot of factors by doing that.
Oh, yeah. And so when you talk about, dopamine and all of these different dopamine, norepinephrine, oxytocin, all these things that are at work when we engage in sexual activity with our spouses, because we are meant to bond with them and to have children with them. So, but you also talk about this idea that, and I want to kind of check out if I'm understanding this correctly, because you talk about, it says, in essence, we create a false bond so we're left unsatisfied, compounding the need to repeat the behavior to attempt to feel satisfied. So is this the idea of almost building up a tolerance? I need more dopamine to get the pleasure that I had when I started this whole thing?
It's a kind of a combination of things.
Okay.
The behavior really is about, it releases the chemicals, and so forth when you're bonding with a person. When you're looking at pornography and you fully come to release, you don't have the action of bonding with another person, rightfully a spouse. Right. So the brain goes, okay, that was good, but I didn't quite finish here. Something's missing, because you can't bond to your screen.
Got it.
Which is also why the escalation to physical activities is so high, which, the side note, is evidenced by the fact that there are over 10,000 illicit massage parlors in the United States. Yeah. Those are there because of supply and demand. So it escalates very easily in that area, and I can attest to that personally. But the other part of it is the dopamine. When you look at pornography, you have more dopamine engages in the system with intensity than when you're with a person typically. So because it's more intense and it's quicker. So because there's so much of it, the receptors in the brain begin to shut down because they're overloaded.
Okay.
Now, when they're shut down, the experience the next time isn't as much. So you need, as in time goes on, you need more often of it, more frequency, more intensity, higher risk, or other types of actions to get the same benefit.
Got it.
The problem with this is that there are, I think Dr. Donald Hilton of American Neurology did a study and said that brain scans and stuff, that pornography is as addictive as cocaine.
Wow.
And there's other studies that say it's also addictive as heroin. So that's the level at which we're dealing with, that addiction level. So that's where people say you just can't just stop it, often.
Right.
Some people can, depending on where they're at. But often because of the severe chemical relations that happen in the brain, and I always say that, porn addicts are drug addicts too, so we got to treat it as such, to completely treat the individual. It makes it very difficult to stop.
So, Dan, you do just a wonderful job in, you talk about the sacraments in this book as a help. You talk about the Blessed Virgin Mary as a help, consecrating yourself to Mary. You also talk about the need to kind of balance body and soul. So how does one's faith and those things that I touched on, why did you include those? How do you see those as beneficial to this kind of an addiction?
This kind of addiction really is spiritual at its root. It's because of the psychological or mental, physical woundedness or brokenness. It's all about feeling not loved, unwanted, not good enough, which we all have feelings to those at certain levels. It just depends on how it controls us and how it plays out in our behaviors. But it's understanding that it's spiritual. God created us to love and be loved. Period. That's it. Now, as we grow up in our childhood, typically we have experiences that tend to facilitate us believing that we're not adequate, we're not good enough, we're not wanted, we're not loved, we're not worthy, on and on and on. Those are all the shame factors. Now, we're not wired by God to experience those. So if we have those, we have pain. If we don't transform that pain, we will transmit it. What happens is we need to dig and find the pain of what happens where, like, why don't I feel good enough? Well, this used to happen with my father. He used to tell me, you'll never amount to anything. You never, whatever it is. As we dig into these things, we find those are the things that are owning us, so to speak, that have triggered our self-beliefs, our false beliefs, false identities. Now, part of the process is forgiving those individuals who began bringing on those self-ideals and realizing that this is not who we are. We got to figure out who we are in God. Then we forgive ourselves for accepting these and behaving in a way that is sinful. So God wants us to forgive other people. We need to forgive people. It's part of the requirement, to get to heaven. As you say in the Our Father, forgive others as we forgive us, as He forgives us. So that's part of the process. So that's part of what we have to dig into as well. So all of this gets deep into that behavior and that sacramental part of it. And then going to confession is forgiveness, asking God's forgiveness for our behaviors. And it's not just, I looked at porn. Forgive me, Father. I didn't forgive myself. I didn't accept your mercy for my behavior. I didn't forgive myself for my negative thoughts of these other individuals, which, I responded with anger when my wife told me I didn't load the dishwasher right. And, that perpetuated into several things. I need to forgive her and for saying those things. I need to forgive myself for having my thoughts, of anger about her. And all of these things to completely clean things up in the confessional. Now, as well, bringing on His body and blood into ourselves so we are one with Him and we have power with that is part of the sacraments. And all of this really is required, in my eyes, for fullness within ourselves and fullness within the church and fullness of understanding who we are in God. And that's where the underlying part of it is that we have to learn and understand and grow in our faith and the truth of who we are in God and ourselves. And all of that involves the church. Mm-hmm. And you can't separate it. You know, I used to try to with other books I've had, and as I've grown myself, I've realized this doesn't work. This has to be part of the plan.
Yeah. And when you talk about, I love when you talk about reordering our identity, you know, trying to kind of get it right with God, that you also talk about fasting, that I think it's important. And one of the things I want to ask you real quick here is, how does fasting, because you say it erodes the resistance to God's grace. So how does it do that?
Fasting puts us in a position to where we are giving up something. Mm. And depending on how deep you fast, how ritualistic you fast, or what, you begin to quickly learn how important other things are. We don't realize how attached we are to even, food, our things, our car, our computer, our behaviors of looking at social media, or even pornography. Mm-hmm. But we begin to realize how attached we are to all these other things, which are not healthy as an individual with our relationship with God. We want Him to be our only attachment, especially, from pornography. It takes us away from Him. So when we begin to fast, we begin to recognize those attachments, and we begin to work on those attachments and develop more self-discipline. Combined with prayer, gives us more strength, power, grace to withstand these things that we're attached to, especially deeply sinful things like, pornography or other behaviors. Not to mention anything else that just isn't healthy. So it grows our spirituality overall. There was a priest once that I'd heard that it said that fasting is the heavy artillery of prayer.
Yeah.
So it really drives things home. It's that next level to do. And you can, it's hard to do for many people, including myself. Yeah. You start small. I'm going to give up dessert.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you go from there.
And one of the things about this book, you kind of lay it out in phases, too, that the first phase is education, then it's reordering our identity, and then it's healing. And we've got about 4 minutes left in the show. So I want you to just briefly discuss the intimacy piece here, because you said all of this is always a search for intimacy. So can you describe that? What is authentic intimacy?
It is being authentic or true to what we're really looking for. It's understanding that we're looking for love. That's really what it's about. And God is the only one that's the perfect love. So often intimacy, people say, well, sex is intimacy, right? Well, physical intimacy with your spouse, which is sex, is one of many building blocks of intimacy, but all of them are, you get intimacy when you're talking with an accountability partner. Mm-hmm. Because you're sharing yourself, you're sharing, deep truths of yourself and woundedness and whatever. That's intimacy. Professional intimacy, entertainment, so forth, with people and spouses, with friends, all those are intimacy. But really it's looking for love and to be accepted and wanted. One of the biggest things that hit me when I first started my recovery, very, very first thing, is listening to a talk by Christopher West. He gave a statement from G.K. Chesterton, said, every man who stands at the doorstep of a brothel is looking for God. I paused that audio because I was crying so hard. It was the first time in my life I ever got it. Yeah. I was looking for love. Wow. I was looking for God, and I couldn't figure out why I was stopping. And I'd been at a brothel multiple times, so it was very personal for me. It hit me right between the eyes.
Wow.
And that's why I say God is loved and be loved. That's our purpose. Yeah. And anything else distracts from that. And that's when we go downhill and get off track and disordered.
Yeah. Oh, well, Dan, I just want to let people know this is an amazing book. If you struggle with an addiction to pornography, someone else because after he goes through these lessons, then he actually has daily action plans, and it gives you kind of what are the things you need to do, what do you need to follow, prayers, etc. I mean, this book's got it all, and it's even got charts so that you can check off. I'm a checker offer, so if I check something off, I feel good about myself. So and he has all of this. That's why I'm a list maker. He has all of this in here. So I would greatly encourage, again, anyone who is struggling with this, or if you know someone who's struggling with this, to get this book, Winning the Battle for Sexual Purity by Dan Aungst, and also parishes, to, have some of these for people. You don't, maybe just put them out, and people might just come by and slip one in their pocket. So Dan, I want to give you kind of a last word about this organization, roadtopurity.com. Tell us a little bit about how are you funded, what are your expectations?
We are primarily funded with donations and grants. Honestly, so many of our programs and products are free or very, very low cost, and this is a belief that I've been instilled with, that if God gives you a gift, you're supposed to give it away. Mm-hmm. And to do that, we have to make things so inexpensive and cover some cost of printing or something like that. But we have like 5 employees. And we have our own building. So we have growth. We have a lot of support, and it's always growing. We've doubled in size in, almost every year for the last several years because of the demand and, generous people, but it continues to grow. And we need support for new programs and things that we're doing. And that's one of the things that we look for. But roadtopurity.com is where we go. We don't turn anybody away that needs help with anything. You can even make free consultation calls with me directly at no cost. And
that's wonderful.
Set appointments, look at our programs. We have other programs online that are free. Books are cost of printing, basically.
Well, I
so
cannot.
Forth,
I cannot. Encourage people to check this out anymore. I mean, this is great. So please do that. Look at that, roadtopurity.com. Thanks, Dan, for being on our show today. Dan's a certified addiction counselor, speaker, author, recovering addict. He's the founder of Road to Purity. So go there, roadtopurity.com, and have a blessed week ahead. And rest in the Lord. You've been listening to The Virtuous Life. I'm your host, Pat Oedy-Murray.